Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. So I wanted to do a little video today on our looping patterns and really how this relates to our healing journey. Now I will say if you're a twin flame watching this, please apply this technique to all your relationships if needed, except for the one with your twin flame. I'll have to do a separate video on that. And the simple reason for that is you do not want to be using any mental activity in resolving anything with your twin. So if you have other relationships in your life and there's some looping patterns there that you would like to take care of, by all means, but with your twin, you do not want to apply this strategy. So just a word of caution there. Now, if you've gone through an awakening or are going through one right now, you know that the biggest shift that you go through during this process is the shift in your mindset. How you perceive life before an awakening and versus after an awakening is very, very different, simply because you go through a massive ego death. Now, when you actually have gone through an awakening, you start to see things very differently. You no longer want to act from the ego. Versus prior to your awakening, when you see looping patterns, you may say stuff like, this is who I am. I can't change that. This is from my mother's side of the family. This is how they always act, and therefore I'm doing it now as well. Or I personally just cannot shift this because this is how it's always been. So you always have a reason or justification for why that pattern does not shift. Now, here are some reasons why you may actually want to break these patterns. One, you're tired of seeing the same emotional response or behavioral response in that same sort of scenario, and you'd like to be able to break that cycle. Otherwise, you recognize that, every time something like this happens, you will always be reacting to it in the same way. Secondly, you kind of don't want to be controlled by your emotions or be reactive. You understand that you are able to take your power back and create a new resolve to this sort of a situation, have a new solution to how you are going to show up when something like this comes out. Now, another reason is you directly or indirectly don't want to pass this on to your children. So you recognize that you need to take a hold of this repeating pattern so you can have a different outcome. And also, we now know that carrying unresolved emotions or thoughts can actually cross over into new lifetimes. And so this is something that you definitely want to be able to break and, get a hold of so that you have a new emotional or behavioral response in those situations. Now, how do you break a cycle on your looping patterns? Now, I'm going to give you 4 simple steps you can follow. Of course, your situation, your patterns may look different. However, you can generally apply this regardless of the situation. But for the purpose of showing you how to apply this, I'm going to give you a hypothetical situation. So let's say that you are someone that gets overly emotional when somebody yells at you or, speaks to you in a very high-pitched voice. Now, this doesn't have to be the reality, but it might just be your perception of the situation when it occurs, which automatically, without you even thinking about it, results in you having an emotional response, such as crying in the situation, going absolutely quiet while somebody is speaking to you. They wish for you to have communication with them, but you are just very caught up in the emotion during that situation. This has happened to you repetitively many times, and you do not know how to overcome this. Now, the first thing you want to do in this situation is really bring awareness to the actual issue. Just knowing that this is a pattern that you have is a huge, huge win in terms of actually evolving from the situation on your healing journey. The second thing that you really want to do with this is actually sit with the awareness of this situation and think to yourself, how does this make me feel? When somebody does this to me, what does it actually make me feel on the inside? What is that underlying emotion that I actually come across in this situation? So, for example, that may be sadness. That may feel like you feel absolutely helpless when that happens to you. So try and understand how that really makes you feel. And while this is happening to you, what that actually feels like in your physical body at that time. Maybe there's some trembling, maybe there is, nervousness, whatever that looks like. So you want to be able to sit with that and maybe even give it a name to say, I feel frustrated when this happens. I feel exhausted when this happens. So really think about that and sit with that. Now, the third thing you want to be able to do is take a look at what you would actually like to feel like in that situation. So, for example, if you feel frustrated with this sort of a situation because of how you end up reacting every time, think about what your higher self would tell you and how you would actually like to shift the situation. So, for example, you may say that when somebody does this to me, I wish I could just remain calm and not be carried away with what's happening. I can't control the other person's, reaction, but I can control mine. And I wish my reaction would be a positive one, which is peace and calmness. And really think about what that would feel like in your body. Now, step number 4, which is the most critical in this exercise, is a visualization strategy, which is basically going to allow you to actually take this scenario and play it out in your head ahead of it happening. So how does that look and feel like? What you're actually going to do is you're going to sit down, close your eyes, and you are going to almost play out a situation. So let's say, your sibling. This is something that your sibling does to you often. Just hypothetically, you could use someone else or whatever this, really feels like for you, but you are going to visualize your, sibling coming to you with an issue where they actually, possibly yell at you. And instead of feeling that old response of you crying in that situation, feeling nervous, feeling jittery, whatever that is for you, you are going to replace it with that new sense of calmness. You remaining peaceful and quiet, regardless of the other person's reaction in that situation. You are going to take control of your emotion and you're going to feel what that's going to feel like in your body, in your nervous system, and really calm yourself out. Now, you can even take this a step further and add a grounding tool to say that when this happens to me, I am going to count to 10. And as that individual is getting upset, I am going to distract myself by counting to 10. And it could be 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And when I get to the counting of 10, I will be completely calm and, feeling that new positive emotion in my body instead of having that reaction. Now, be patient with yourself as you practice this exercise. It may not show up perfectly in terms of what you would like it to look like the first time you try it. However, with practice, it will get better. Now, the key thing here is to just keep reinforcing that positive feeling of calm and, peacefulness every time you visualize this so that you are preparing yourself for when that situation actually happens to you in the 3D. And what that will do is it will trigger a new response in your nervous system so that you can be calmer and more peaceful when it really does show up. Now, depending on how long, you've had this sort of a wounding, and for example, if you can't even tell when this really started, that's probably a good way to know that it is something that is deeply embedded in you. And so it may take some time to overcome. However, with regular practice, you can definitely make sure that you overcome this emotional response and looping pattern so that you can resolve it. Just remember that healing is a journey, and looping patterns are just an invitation for you to be able to overcome them and not actually be controlled by them. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope this video was helpful for you. Thanks. God bless.